Okay, so continuing our month's theme today, I'm going to show you how to illustrate shiny objects. So these two things, the transparent objects and shiny objects, was what I had thought I would do definitely. And if there's anything more that you can think of, maybe you can share it during the week, and then I can look for reference images accordingly. So I'll give you an idea of what kind of materials we're looking at. Anything that covers a surface becomes a material. So you could have things like bricks and stone because they become walls. You could have fabric. So how fabric drapes on a body, or if it's just kept on, or tablecloths or something, that becomes a surface. Flooring, um, pavements, that becomes surfaces. And materials of different kinds also. So you could probably have baskets, that's also a material. So you could really think of all sorts of stuff. And if you come up with something, just put it on the group, and then I can figure out whether that would fit in the category. Even if it doesn't matter really. I'll try and do that for you. Okay. So today's topics, I'll just show you the pictures. I'm very bad with my shiny objects. I think this is brass or copper. I can't tell. So we have different colors in metals. We have a reddish metal, yellowish metal, and whitish metal. And there could be tinges in these also. There could be slightly bluish gray. There could be a reddish yellow. There could be a blackish red. All sorts of combinations are possible. These are just three out of many. Oh, wait a minute. Jasmine has just gone off. We'll just wait for her to join back.
Okay. While we're waiting, I might have to leave slightly early later on.
Oh, how early do you want to leave?
At least 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I think I'll finish a major portion of the painting, and then I suppose you
Okay.
can leave. All right. Yeah, so like I was saying, that there are multiple shades even in these reds and yellows and grays. I want to just show you how to illustrate the shiny part. If we distill the information we are receiving from the image, we will notice that there are definite segregations in the colors and where the colors are placed. So essentially what we need to look for are the placements of the shiny spots, of the shadows, of the reflections if there are any, and the medium tones. Then sometimes you will also have a dark to light coloring. So notice all of that. So basically we are looking at different shapes put together with different types of colors or non-color. What we often see is the object for itself, and we tend to then get so involved or attached to the object that we don't see the color or the shade very, um, I guess, laterally. So if I were to zoom into this object, I could easily just draw some parts of the object in a certain way. So here, if I zoom in, if I focus on just the highlight, this is how the highlight would appear. But that's not how we see the object. Oh, the line has disappeared. I don't know why. Let me try again. Yeah. So there is a distinct shape to the highlight. Similarly, there's a distinct shape to the shadow. There are sharp edges and then there are fuzzy edges. So this shadow extends all the way to the right in a curve. And then all of this is rather fuzzy around the highlight. So I want you to be able to look at pictures of shiny objects with high reflective surfaces in terms of the various shades or colors that we need to fill in. That is all we need to do. In every space, you will notice that there is something similar. You can easily identify a shiny reflective shape on these sides, which are brighter. And then on the underside of the spout also, there seems to be a reflection, which matches this. Similarly, if these tones are to be matched, then we have this as well. So all these red spaces are kind of cordoning off the medium tones. And on the edge of the medium tones, you will have the shiny tones. Sorry, these two are shinier. I need to change this. This is shiny. So it's brighter. That's not medium. And you have shiny here, then here. And just notice the shape. Some places they are teardrop shapes. Some places it's like an S shape, C curve, and so on. And then lastly, we will have shadows. And those shadows are in these spots. You have this, and it goes all the way up here. There are some highlights over here also. So each of those arrows that I have drawn will show you a different shape, and that shape will then be filled up with a color. That's all we have to look at. Okay, so I'm going to share this image with you just so that you can keep in mind how to look for different shapes and different tones. Okay, so first of all, we are going to start off with sketching this jug. Or no, actually, let's sketch this because it's a little more complicated. It'll be better to sketch this in pencil, and then we will paint this jug. Okay? We are going to make very small sketches. They're not going to be like a whole page full. Even the final object that we will paint won't be more than about 3 inches or so, about the size of our palm. That way, all the shapes remain manageable. So just as a thumb rule, unless you have to make a lot of detail in an object, don't make it too large. When you make an object very large, but you don't have too many things on it, then we have to be able to be skilled enough to then make the object look interesting, even though it has no other design on top of it. So best to, just as a thumb rule to begin with, keep your illustration about the size of your palm. So that's about an A5 size picture. Okay. So when drawing any object, first is to draw only its the components. The yellow metal kettle, I'm making about this big, no bigger than about this size. So much. So it could be only about so large for me. I'm going to start off with breaking this up into its component shapes. So the belly will look more like a oval or circle. From here, I will make an oval for the, very much like we did our transparent objects, except this time they're not transparent. But making these lines helps you in figuring out proportions. And then you will have just a series of concentric ovals going up a certain direction. So when you draw it like this, it becomes easier to join the lines and make shapes which are symmetrical on both sides and they make sense. So here I think the circle is rounder. And keep looking at the reference image. Now, when you're sketching, do remember that for pure sketching, any number of lines are fine. We are not going to paint this picture. So this is almost like a warm-up for our hands and for our eyes. Now, the second part I just wanted to show you is if you feel very intimidated by curves like these, then one way to make these curves easier is to break them into straight lines. And then you can easily curve up the space around or between the curved lines and create this. So I just wanted to demonstrate how to make these curves a little better. So if you can just have a look at this. Suppose you have an S-shaped curve that you're trying to create with lines. Make lines of a certain proportion which are straight. So this is just straight lines. Now what I don't want you to do is do drawing like this as far as possible, because this will give you a curve but create a very ugly line. Somehow making these broken lines is better. And then between these lines, you can always curve small parts. So your lines should show flow. They should not show fracture. So this is with lines and flow. And this would be fractured strokes. So at this point now, I'll show you how we have to draw the handle. So here are a few things that you look out for size and proportion. Make these lines on either side of the pot. And from here, you know where the handle has to go outward. So draw a horizontal line. Visually try and measure how far you see the line from maybe the center of this pot. So it's, I can see it's not the same, just a little less from the bottom of the center. So this is the, I guess, the equator of the oval that I made first. Maybe even higher would do. From here, I have a line that goes towards 1 o'clock. From here, I have a line that goes towards just above 3 o'clock, and then 2 o'clock, and then 3 again, and here is the curve. So when you do this, you get the right direction of line. If you try to make this curve without some kind of guideline of shape and size and placement, we can go really off. Once this is drawn, you can make some adjustments to your picture. So I can see that there is some kind of rectangular piece over here on the right. And then based on this line, as I'm drawing, I can recalibrate my lines and curves. Some places you might draw some things too far away. But all that becomes a little easier to understand once you draw these guidelines, these vertical and horizontal guidelines. And everything that you size, you have to measure as per the previous lines that you have drawn. On the left, notice where the spout ends. The height of your handle on the right and the spout is more or less the same. So you can draw a line straight through and through. I've gone too far. So here you'll see how all the lines that you draw help you in drawing the correct lines. And after you've drawn this also, don't erase any of the lines. In this, you will be also able to see the other three types. You will see highlights, midtones, and shadows. So using the same guidelines, we can create the next part and block the shadows first because that's the easiest to do. In doing that, you will already separate spaces between highlights and midtones. And then just like everything else, same principle for the rest of the shadows as well. Now in the lid, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 highlights. But that position can get a little confusing. Where exactly should you make the highlight becomes difficult to see because there's so many other things in the picture. So if you see that happening and you find yourself confused, start with blocking and shading at least the parts that you identify. So this dark patch around the highlight on the left, oh sorry, the right of the picture, and its shape with a dark, sharp edge on the left. That's pretty easily visible. So you can continue to draw that. Notice how this excess shading on the left coincides with the flatness of the tear of the um, lid. Then there is midtones, and this can get very confusing. And just at the base of the midtones, you have another dark line. Once your dark spaces are shaded, then you can start shading the medium tones, lighter in the medium tones, and also places where you have slightly deeper lines, like over here, and slightly duller highlights.
Aditi,
Yeah.
where the spout is,
Ah,
over there, there's a reflection of the spout on the kettle. So do we
this
do
side.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something there.
Yeah. So again, you don't need to know that it is the reflection of the spout. You do see a dark line, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you just have to translate that onto the this on the body of the kettle. That's all. So in some places you will see the highlight very clearly, but it won't be as bright as say this highlight or the highlight on the spout itself. But you will probably see these two parallel lines coming down in a weird shape and then going round the edge and then merging with
Yeah.
some kind of shadow. Yeah. So draw it exactly like you see it. Correct. And behind that also there are some objects that are visible. But we don't know what they are. So you can just shade that section there. So sometimes it helps to be like one of those, like there are certain workers in offices or I suppose even in corporates, but they don't know what is happening. They've been given orders. And if, God forbid, if you are a client or if you're visiting that place, if you're a patron of a restaurant, and then you say, okay, I need so and so, they have no decision making ability. They are usually so blank. And all they can say is, मैं पूछ के आता हूँ, manager से पूछ के आता हूँ. And then manager is nowhere to be seen, and they also don't have powers. Now, as unattractive as it may seem, we have to take on that role when you are drawing. You are not in control of what you see. You see what you see, and that is it. You have to literally very dumbly learn to put it down. The more we think about what we are putting down at this stage, at the sketching stage, the more we trip ourselves up. And you won't even realize what is happening. Before you know it, you are making lines which you think should be there. But if you were to analyze that on paper, you will not see a reciprocating line on your reference image at all. This has happened to me so many times in the beginning. And believe me, it's such a frustrating experience because you finish the whole illustration. You can see that it's a pot, a spout, a handle, and yet there's something missing. And then after years, and I have gone back to that picture to figure out what went wrong. And I said, how could I have seen something so differently? So to give you an example, this very same spout that you have identified over here, while we see that there is one particular curve to it, so mostly it is a straight line, right? Over here, it's almost a straight line coming down. If we see it as the reflection of a spout and we see this, we will be making a much more exaggerated curve over here. And on the face of it, it should not look bad, but somewhere it will not look like the object that we are trying to sketch. And if more items on the image are made in that fashion, there are subtle changes or subtle differences that just completely change the identity of the pot. Now here it's very interesting. While we have a nice thick shadow in the center. That thick shadow also has two tones within that dark column in the center. There's a shape on top which is slightly darker than the shape in the middle, which is pretty dark in itself. And then it goes and becomes even darker. And then there's this odd shape on the left, on the right. And then you have an area where it goes from dark to light. There's a fuzzy edge that connects the darkest to the medium, and then through that to the lightest spot. Now, every time you draw these objects, there will be some difference in the lighting. Some places you will feel that the highlight is a nice dark, stark contrast to everything around it. And then in some cases, you just see a fuzzy edged highlight, which is so wishy-washy you can't even tell what you can do with it. How are your pots looking?
I've not looked at the whole pot only, I'm just in the details.
Oh, good, good. That's good.
So I don't know what I have done. I am following the shadows.
Very good. Very nice, Shivani. I think it's looking very good. So we'll spend another 10 minutes on this. Try to merge the dark with the medium tones where necessary. Because I think even last time, Shivani, I think that your tones had been, there have been fewer tones than we need. So at this point, start merging them and increasing their depth.
As always, my pot is thoda teda. Everything I do is teda. See?
No, then you can present it uh, teda. Then it'll look straight. It's good,
There's
but it's
always
going in the
Photoshop.
right direction. Yeah, there's always Photoshop. So I wanted to ask you all something. From Jan onwards, I wanted to announce a travel batch. So since yours is the smallest batch, I was hoping to make this the travel illustration batch. So usually when we do a travel page, we we make something related to a particular country. So we will make food, we would make an, definitely some monument, maybe some artifact, a bird, animal. I'll share some pictures of previous travel illustration that I've made with other batches. So what I found is that a proper travel illustration journal covers everything. It will cover all the topics that we have done. Like, for example, this metal kettle that we are doing right now could easily be something that you might be able to even illustrate about Pune, for example. There is a big metalware, traditional metalware industry in Pune. So, similarly, there would be other places where we could do it. So, in the process of making that artifact for the travel journal, you will learn how to make shiny objects. So, the past 3 years, I used to take the topic and then focus on the topic. And then once a year, we would do a travel illustration batch. So, the next year, I wanted to convert this Friday afternoon batch to travel illustration. So you can either use this drawing book that we have, or you can get an A5 journal that we can then start filling out. So this is going to be like virtual travel. And we will use the book as well. So we'll do the practice work in the book, and then we will do it in the journal. That way, as we go along, your journal will be filled up. There's another aspect to travel illustration also, is to practice how to write about your travels. It's not just necessarily about where you visit, but about what you learn from the place also. So you can do a little bit of research. You can also write your experience about making that travel page. There's all sorts of options. But what I've realized is that most people don't write their thoughts about it, about anything. In fact, we're not an essay writing population. So we don't know how to compose our thoughts. We don't know how to make text interesting, whether it's a short essay, a long essay. So maybe practice that as well. So do you think that's a good idea? Would you all like to continue with the travel thing?
So then all the
I'd love
other
that.
people will join this batch and
Yes.
do another class.
Yeah, so people who want to do the other stuff, they will do it differently. And people who will do it over here, we will go through pretty much the same thing. But it will be, so the focus would be slightly less. Like, for example, this illustration that we've done over here is a little more detailed. But for the travel illustration, this would be probably in your book itself directly. We might make it in pen with stippling, we might make it in watercolor, but more spending less time on the art study, more on using it or employing that for the illustrating of the journal.
So we'll have images of certain cities or whatever, some
Yes.
travel images.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
I think it should be very nice. We'll do. Sorry?
There's still a regular class on different day or something?
There
Just
are
like extra?
all the other classes are on. So they will be on as per usual. They will have a separate schedule in which we will be doing different things, like how we've been doing the past 3 years. And the travel would be focusing on travel, so that we will, like, for example, in Jan, we will take one particular country, and we will the whole month do everything related to that country. And every class, we will be filling in something in the journal itself.
So if we want to do regular class and travel, it's 2 classes.
Yeah. So there have been a lot of people asking for a travel class, and I have no other time during the week. So I wanted to convert this into the travel class and get more people to come to this batch. This batch used to be the most populous batch 2 years ago. And then everyone is now slowly shifted to Saturday morning.
I know. It's during my lunchtime also. I love that Saturday class.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll bring some of them back to this batch.
Yeah. So this is from January.
From Jan, yes. Okay, I'll just be back. I need a minute. Okay, shall we move to that other brass spot now?
This is my.
Ah, nice. It's looking very good. Okay, so you're getting those midtones now. Okay, good. Okay, so now let's use up this space at the bottom to try and draw the other jug. Here now, we'll make it slightly bigger than the teapot. And you can start off with marking a center line because apart from the handle, the shape of that jug is pretty much symmetrical. So whenever you have to draw a symmetrical object, whatever the symmetry is around, sometimes it's vertical, sometimes it's horizontal, always draw the center line. From the center line, let me give you some directions with this first. So let's see if this is our center line. And if we divide the line into half, so this is not dividing the pot into half, dividing the line half. You get to see that the fattest portion of the jug is at about halfway up the height of the jug. Then the neck comes down to, this would be a quarter of the line. So the neck is slightly higher than that. Now, when I say slightly, even that can be measured if you want to. You can divide this further into 1/8 of the line. So you know that the edge is coming almost straight down, and then there's a curve going outward. Then there's a curve going inward, and then you have this base where you have the bottom curving downward. Each of these also can tell you how much it is curving. So for example, if we get a proportion, if this is how much the jug is outward, ready? And then you take the same measurement from here, for example. Or let me put it another way. You can measure how far the curve of the line also has gone. It's about 1.5 times the length between the middle of the pot and 1/4 of the way up. Okay, so there are internal geometries which we can rely on. If I were to extend this line further down, that will give me an indication of how far out or in the base of the pot is. And I can continue to divide this space into as many parts as I want to get the right information. Likewise, even over here, I can take this up and see how far the curve has come in here. And all these points will give me information about where my line needs to go. So I'm going to share this again with you. The earlier picture also, I haven't shared that. So that you can have it handy. Okay. And then build your proportions from here. Okay, so here we go. I'll be using the same measurement from before. So we have this line and we have just a general horizontal baseline. That's it. It's not measured right now. Now divide the line in half. So in order to do that, to know exactly what is half, just look at the line from the top, not from one side. Look at it from the top. Put a finger there. That'll give you a better indication of where the half line is. So we've basically just drawn vertical and horizontal lines without a measurement. Then we are going to break this line into quarters. You don't have to really do the bottom, but if you want to, you can just check that you've got the same measurement throughout. Now, use this measurement on the quarter measurement. And you can use something like maybe a pen or a pencil or something like even a toothpick. Don't use a scale, because if you are dependent on a scale, you will never be able to draw this on the fly. But use your hands, fingers, convert anything else into a tool that can measure. So this is now a square. This is half of the square. Does it look like what we have? And then based on that, see how far you want to take the outer curve. I think so much is enough. It's not an entire half part. It's a little less. Bring this line down. And then just next to that line is the base. And here we get our first line. Now, obviously, when we are drawing it on the other side, we don't have to go through the same rigmarole. So you can just measure this and put a point there. Measure this, put a point here, and you get the opposite side. Now somewhere here, our point runs across. And now you should be able to see the details a lot clearer. Now these same lines can help us build the handle also. Unfortunately, the handle is only on one side, so we don't really have to worry much. There is a circular, I guess, a button-like thing which is used to seal the pipe to make a handle out of that. And then you have a line that goes right up to this edge, the corner, and then comes almost straight down just above over here. It's such a weird shape, but we have to just make it like we see it. Excuse me. And then you have a heart-shaped piece of metal that's attached to the body of the vase, a jug, with oval shaped rivets, I think.
This pot has this copper texture, as if it's beaten.
Yes, it does.
You hear me?
It could be beaten.
Yeah, but how does one draw that?
And here we need to erase the lines so that we can paint. Once you're satisfied with the shape, go back to the original image. And you might feel the need to make a few adjustments based on the original image. Now, we can only so much with trying to make absolute measurements. But now that I see the original image, I feel that my curve can be a little deeper here. So I'm changing that. And I want you to be able to figure this out for yourself. Maybe you got it right and you don't need the adjustment. So the way I check for these is looking at the negative space. The negative space in the earlier option was almost like a leaf shape. But in the photograph, I see that there is a larger dip in the bottom. So it's straight here. And then there's a curve like this. And here, the handle goes a lot rounder. Now this is as round as my handle is going to go. Any more than that, it's going to start looking really awkward. So beyond a point, making any adjustment also is futile. So last time I'd shown you an eraser with which you can erase very small details. And when you're doing this, keep a brush handy so that if the eraser creates dust, don't use your hand, just move it with a brush, because your hand will definitely be greasy and your brush won't. So while you are erasing, you will be spreading all that graphite all over the paper and making your paper much duller than it is. And for larger spaces, use the flexible eraser because flexible erasers don't create dust. Once you remove these straight lines, you will start seeing the shape and its contours more real and believable. Now, all the other lines also, after you've evaluated them, can be lightened just a little bit. So roll the eraser on top of your pencil lines. Make them very light. Don't erase the lines totally, but just lift off a little bit of the graphite. It should be fairly dark still. If you remove everything, then with the first wash itself, all of the pencil lines will get lost. That has happened to me again several times. Now, at this point, we need to make a very light line for the highlight. No matter what happens, we cannot paint in the highlight area. You might not be able to see it clearly, but the lines that I've made are not straight. They are hatched on the side. They're slightly zigzag because, like you pointed out, Shivani, the object looks like it's beaten metal. So its highlight will also show that beaten metal texture, light, and then at a medium tone just around it, and then deeper tone somewhere in the center. So just for our sake, I'm also going to mark the deeper tones. Much of this is going to get hidden. So just the outlines of all the spaces that we saw, even in the earlier picture, you can make. And then there's a secondary highlight over here at the neck. And then there's a shadow on the left, which is very fuzzy, so we won't paint that. Now, given the size of the object and the areas we have to paint, the brush size becomes quite critical. So I would recommend a brush with which you can paint the largest section maybe in 2 or 3 strokes. So the first wash, we're going to use a number 10 brush so that our brush can flow easily and pull the paint quickly. And we will be pulling the paint towards the left. So we try to create this shadow naturally. Now our painting is not going to look like the photograph. So throw that expectation out of the window. It is going to look like a representation of the image that we see. It is a watercolor image. So we are not going to get the exact shade, exact luminance, the brilliance of the highlight, none of that. So the less we expect, the better. Now, first thing is to do a color test. And you can do a color test in the book itself. We'll put together a few shades and see which color suits us best. Start off with maybe a gamboge and a scarlet. Not gamboge, sorry, yellow ochre. And I'm writing these combinations down over here. I'll make a square that's about a centimeter by a centimeter. My paint is a wash consistency, which is fine. It just gives me an idea of the tint. And I will write what this is made of. So this is yellow ochre plus scarlet. If it looks too red, then let's try yellow ochre and burnt sienna. Then we could try burnt sienna, burnt umber, and yellow ochre. To this mix, maybe I can try adding scarlet. What you see on your palette and what you see on paper can be very different. So color swatching is very helpful. So I'm going with this color. That's yellow ochre, burnt sienna, burnt umber, and scarlet. I'll clean out a little bit of my palette to build that color scheme. As usual, when you're making this color, you should have little bits of all the content colors also. So here's yellow ochre. To that, I'll mix burnt sienna, to which I'll mix a little bit of burnt umber and then scarlet. So the component colors must be visible also. And somewhere in here is I think, the right shade. Now this is just the wash. This is not going to be the highlight, the shadows. So you can use this color very lightly to create the wash. The wash will cover everything except the highlights. And we have highlights in quite a few places. So even in these rivets, you have highlights. Not in these ones, but in this one over here. So maybe if you want, you can observe how I'm doing this. I carefully will go around the highlight first so that I don't forget about it. And you can go over the handle as well. Spread the brush and pull it down. Load the brush before it goes completely dry. Press it down. Oh, I left that highlight, so I'm making another one towards the base over here. So just observe this. Don't paint yet. Keep looking at the image constantly. Don't rush. If your paint is well hydrated, you will not get any patches. This part I have done by holding the brush horizontally, book horizontally. But from this point on, I'm going to lift the book up. And I'm going to drag my paint towards the left. Everything is covered over here. Now I'm going to use a little bit of the lighter color because the shade in this part of the jug is slightly lighter. So the part where we have more yellow ochre is more conducive for this part of the jug. Going back to a watery shade of the earlier color. And then on the side, I'm actually going to add a little extra burnt umber. And leave it like that. Now, no matter what happens at this stage, don't fiddle with the painting. The colors are going to merge, things are going to do whatever they need to do and settle down. Oh, I forgot to make the base. Now this is going to, I hope this doesn't leave a patch. Yeah, that's it. Now I have a white spot over here. I have a white spot here where the brush has not gone. Don't worry if something like that happens. There are some more white spots. Leave that be. It won't really make a difference. If anything, it'll look more like another highlight somewhere. All right, you want to give it a shot? Shivani, it's 3:45 already. So, will you have time or do you need to leave?
I need to leave.
Okay. All right. So, Jasmine and I will complete this and I'll share the video, then you can complete the rest. Anyway, we need to wait for the paint to dry after this stage. If you have not painted it, then don't start right now. Do it with the recording. If you've started it, just let this dry and then you can paint the next layers afterwards.
Okay.
Okay. See you next week then. Bye.
Bye, Jasmine.
Bye. I'm done with this portion. Oh, I didn't do the handle.
Okay, even I need to wait for this to dry. Okay, mine is dried a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to change my brush and use a thinner brush, a number 6 or 7. So the way to decide what brush to use is to know how much area you need painted. If it were a large area, we use a number 10 brush. Now here the area is somewhere in between large and small. But if we have too much medium in our brush and we use it in a small area, we'll end up just creating a big bubble of water or even pigment. And it doesn't settle well and starts creating clouds. So better than that, it's good to just choose a smaller brush so you will carry less medium in any case. Now we have to start putting in deeper colors. So all the colors that we have created before seem to work. I'm going to add more yellow ochre and light red. Now as we go into the next layers, our paint has to be slightly thicker also. It can't be too runny. So I'm going to paint one side, one part of the reflection of the handle in this. It's a very subtle color. Then the base and the remaining, just the handle part over here, over here, and make strokes like these that come downward towards the darker part. But a little less in right underneath the highlight. There is a channel you'll see of a highlight that runs from the top of the highlight on the neck, the highlight on the circular part. And it goes around that in some kind of a shape. So I'm carefully laying the color down and not fiddling with it too much. These are fairly sharp lines. So even if you get a sharp edge, it won't really look odd. The same goes for all the similar shapes on the handle. And here too, you can make a broken line so that it does not look like the handle is made from a smooth metal. All of this was beaten metal, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you come to this heart-shaped rivet, you can, after you've applied that little bit of paint on the top part of the heart, wipe your brush and just drag this paint downward. So it will be just ever so slightly light. Now here's the thing you can do to blur some lines. when the paint is slightly dried, but it's still damp, take the same brush that you've used, wipe it on a rag, and just use it on the edge that you want smooth. Make small strokes and keep wiping that brush so that the paint that it has collected does not continue. On the base, we have a harsh line, so we can maintain that. But on this side, we have a very fuzzy line. And on the center also, it's fuzzy, but we can leave it that way. Let me know when you're done with this layer, because while this is drying, I want to show you how to paint a gray inside in a different technique.
Shall I show you what I've done so far?
Yes, yes.
I think my color difference is too patchy.
Okay. But it's okay for now. It's okay. Here at the handle, tell me something. Have you painted the entire handle or something? There seems to be a little notch that's left.
I did the whole thing.
Okay, okay. So what's going to happen now? You need to put a little shadow afterwards, just behind this. Just remember that. I'll point it out to you because even I'm going to do that. Okay. Now, while the body of the jug is drying, we will paint the inside of the jug. So here, use any residual blue you may have and add black to that. So you get a bluish black shade. And we don't want it to be too dark. It has to be fairly light. Now, if you notice the inside of the jug, it's like a C shape, sleeping C shape. That's here. That's the edge. That's the lip, inner edge. And then from the center to a little bit on the right, I'm going to make these very light gray lines, horizontal lines. Same thing from the left, but only on the inside. And then a little bit on the outer edge, but I'll leave a gap between the two. A little more on the inner edge. So now can you start seeing the highlight of the white metal also in this? Those brush strokes, those horizontal brush strokes are enough to create an illusion of metallic highlight and shadow. So this is again layer one. This is an instance where your layers are not watery. They are light, but they are distinct. Now, slightly to the right of the central highlight or shadow, I will take the same color in the same consistency and keep making a smaller patch, slightly dark. So here, this is just layering. And we'll leave it at that. Don't do anything more at this stage. And don't overdo it. Okay, let it be now. Let it be. Now we're going to do something fairly dramatic. We'll take a little bit of ultramarine blue, a little bit of cobalt blue. And we're going to make a few highlights, shadows in the jug using these colors. Now, ideally, I would have you make a patch of the base tone and put a blue in that to see how it looks. But maybe you can just do something like this to see what color emerges after it dries. But I want you to just observe how I'm doing this. When blue and brown are mixed together, it gives you a deeper blue or deeper brown. So I'm just going to put this on the handle so you get to see what starts happening here. You start getting some interesting shadows, but not in an expected color. So this technique allows you to create an illusion of dark or light without having to stick to that boring shade that you think is the only right shade to go by. Now come to the neck. This is one side. This is the other side. Normally we would think that it would be better to put maybe another layer of the same color. But that makes the illustration very static. So after this layer is done, we can revisit and make a deeper layer in the same browns. But till then, you can make one layer in these unusual blues. And you'll see a very dramatic effect. Okay, so this is the shade, how we use it. Now, the application also is very important. We don't apply back and forth as much as we just do a swift brush stroke. It's important to not overwork our colors. I will add an additional blue color over here to make it deeper. And then take this blue, and at this point, if you're comfortable with it, use a thinner brush to make this line of the edge. If your current brush, the number 6 or even number 10, if they have adequate, I guess, conditioning, and you are comfortable with it, and it has those 1 or 2 hairs sticking out that can help you make a thin line, you can use this as well. And now for the dark patch here. Notice that I'm deliberately not keeping the edges too smooth because our container has a beaten metal effect. And the same thing now, reduce the color in the brush, and I'm making the lighter tones up here. So as you can see, I'm almost making like the beaten texture. And don't do too much of that beaten texture. Yeah, so you were saying something, Jasmine?
So here we are deliberately making it look patchy.
Yes,
The
correct.
application.
Correct. Yeah. And we can do one more layer, this time with burnt umber and blue. See, this is a nice deep brown color we get. Burnt umber and the same two blues that I'd used here for the next layer. Maybe a little scarlet or um, burnt sienna might also do. I'm putting the color down here so you can see how it looks. It looks like just another gray, but it has a certain warmth that it reflects the warmth of the colors used here. Because it comes from the same family of colors, with just a few new additions, it will sit better without complaining in this setting also. And the same color then we will use in smaller patches in other areas where you see this dark shade. So remember that when you're making these darker shades, to paint something else or paint something less every time. That way you can create dimension. Now the last bit is this dark patch here. You can see how making the shadows is making this look so real. So obviously it would help if we continue to the bottom. Just make a stroke like this with a slightly light color in your brush. And then like I showed you, the fuzzing out, use the same brush, wipe it and pull it down. And that's also optional. You don't really need to do it. I'm adding a second there to make it dark and pulling that color towards the bottom. Now, if you do want to make a shadow to this also, a drop shadow, or what's called a cast shadow, instead of using these same colors in the grays, you can, I normally use a cerulean blue, a very light, watery cerulean blue. And you make an oval shape a little way up above the base of the jug. Make an oval shape and bring it nice curve towards the center. So that should do. So some artists use things like a white pen or white pencil also to make some highlights. And that's perfectly fine too. Sometimes when you're painting this, either you forget a highlight or you feel that you can intensify it better with adding more lines. You get these gel pens, or you can also use what's called a glass pencil to make those lines. So for example, if I feel that I could do with few more highlights in my handle, then I could add just a few more shapes and that might brighten it up a little bit. Or suppose a rivet like this, I feel I need a little more highlight. Now I tend to avoid this as far as possible because sometimes you just don't know where to stop and you just make dots all over the place. And then it becomes very difficult. But knowing that you have this option is more important. You don't need to do it. You can choose to not do it. But not knowing sometimes can be very debilitating.
I don't know. My shading with the black is very patchy.
Let's see. Let me have a look.
It looks like it's got some disease.
No, this is nice. So I see what looks patchy to you, but that is just a matter of having maybe not having a light enough hand, but the highlights are very compelling. That is very good. Your shadows are in the right place, so that is very good. It is looking like a rounded object. That's fine. It's just looking like a very surrealist object. It's a little wishy-washy here and there. So
Yeah.
lines may not be convincing. But that I think is something that automatically will come with practice. But in terms of getting the right shades, putting them in the right places, these are literally like ABC kind of tasks, which I think you've done well enough.
I'm gonna try and smoothen it out. Whatever lines are formed, the outlines.
No, don't do it. I would recommend against it. Because in that process, there's a good chance that everything will get a little warped. Don't worry. Let this be. Look for another similar colored metal object. Simple enough. Maybe you can do away with the handle also. I'm sure you'll find something like a bowl or like a
A
vati.
glass. Yeah.
That
A
might be
glass.
glass, that might be good. So you just get simple lines and simple colors and shades and highlights. So all you need to do is make vertical lines on that, and you should be able to get that easier. Now you know how to mix this color, so it'll be that much easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right.
Okay, great. All right, I'll see you next week. If you have any suggestions,
Yes.
please send them to me.
Cool. Will do.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.